Hey, guys. Morning. Let me get this started up here. I got my stuff set here. That's not what I wanted. That one. Are there chess players in here? Anyone? Some? Let me get a just temperature of everyone real quick. Raise your hand if you've heard of rooks. Okay, castling. So some good hands up. En passant. Alakine's gun. One. Okay, here we go. All right, cool. Excellent. Because I want to kind of talk about chess today. We've heard some great messages this week. We've heard about service. We've heard about forgiveness. We've heard about obedience. Everything in the Bible that we've to an extent, not even to an extent, that we've been ordered to do. We're ordered to forgive. We're ordered to serve. We're ordered to be obedient to Him. And if it doesn't beg the question, then maybe if you're overthinking things, the question comes up: Are we pawns? I've heard it asked before, and not every. There it goes. It's not always a straight answer every time, but that you get in response. But are we pawns? Because the word pawn, we want to be obedient, of course, but the word pawn has a lot of really negative connotations, doesn't it? I mean, when you think about pawns in chess, they have the least movement options, one square forward at a time, sometimes two. They threaten the least area, 2 squares. Again, forward to either side. They're the smallest piece on the board and arguably the least interesting at an aesthetic level even. And with 8 of them on the board, it's really easy to consider them expendable. That word pawn, like I said, has a lot of negative connotations. No one wants to be called a pawn. If you're looking at the chessboard, it's really easy to think of God as the king piece, clearly, in that metaphor. Maybe Archangel Michael is the queen, kind of moving wherever it wants, knocking stuff down wherever he needs it knocked down. I don't know where anyone else fits in. I don't know where anyone else's names is except Gabriel. So talk to me afterward. You want to debate what piece Gabriel is. But what would stop God from using us as his pawn at the end of the day, though? When Gideon was surrounding the Midianites couldn't do anything about being moved by God's power. The armies of Ammon, Moab, and Edom could do nothing in 2 Chronicles to God's power. And in 2 Kings, the Syrians could do nothing about God's power, asking them to destroy each other. Even Pharaoh, a God among his people as he were, could not stop God from simply hardening his heart. So I think what saves us from not being God's pawn in that very literal sense is that we're giving ourselves up willingly to his will, that we are willingly serving him, and that it is our choice to receive these orders and to obey. So what I want to kind of do is just a defense of pawns so that we can kind of see how much that we have in common with those little guys on the chessboard. Once you get into studying chess a little bit, that white and black and sometimes the black is red board. Because at the end of the day, pawns are nothing to shrug at. They've actually been for a very long time, they've actually been a very vital part of the attack strategy of the early and mid game in chess. And they've had very few changes from their first incarnation back in the 6th century AD. The only thing I can think of would be the fact that if on your first move with a pawn, you're allowed to go 2, which is something they added only very recently to try to speed things up. And it's the only reason that en passant exists. So again, very few changes since there it goes. That's going to be a running gag there. Put that in there. Very few changes since, like I said, that's a very old game, and they're still finding new things out about it, but as they continue to play. But no one really messes with the pawns lightly in a game of chess because they're well defended. Let me pull up Ephesians 6:10, if you want to follow. Where'd it go? There it is. Ephesians 6:10, finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Our strength as pawns is borrowed. It's not just borrowed from him, but from each other. There's something called the trade, for those of you that don't know chess very well. And the trade is the point values that all these pieces are accrued, or assigned, rather. Pawns are, of course, a 1, where something more with a lot more strength, like a queen or a rook, are much higher. 9 for a rook, 10 for a queen. And no one wants to really trade. The trade is, if I take this piece, he'll lose 1 point. But if I put myself at threaten, I may lose the points that I've used to take his. No one really wants to trade up their rook for a pawn, just to take someone's pawn. And the reason that those pawns have strength is because they're leaning on each other. Pawn chains, these formations where the pawns are diagonal from each other, and what they're actually doing is guarding each other. You can't capture a pawn without one of the other pawns stepping in to take the guy that took it. And so taking a pawn has massive consequences. They don't want to mess with it. And just like in that, I'm going to read out of Ecclesiastes real quick. Ecclesiastes 4:9 through 12. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. It's our strength in numbers. It's the fact that we can lean on each other and hold on to each other for that strength. And granted, when a pawn is taken out of the line, there's a weakness in that line. I'm sure many of us this year will not disagree that it hurts, and we feel it when one of our fellow pawns are taken out of the line. But it doesn't matter how few you're with, because Matthew 18:20, where only 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I will be there with him. Just like even 2 or 3 pawns can still hold their line, can still hold their chain, so can we, even with only 2 or 3 of us. So long as we're leaning on each other, we have God with us. And to bring God, our king, back into it, the king, again, if you're uninitiated to chess, is kind of unassuming. It has only a few more movement options than the pawn. And because you have to protect the king in the game, it's really easy to think of it as weak as well. But let me go back to that trade that I mentioned earlier, those point values. It's impossible to capture the king. He's not traded. So a lot of people actually consider that the king does not have 9 or 10 points, that the king is worth infinite points, that his power is unlimited because he cannot be captured. The world out there doesn't see power in God. They either see him as powerless to do things, they see him as non-existing, or if he is here, he doesn't care to act. But we know that this world right now, he's biding his time where he can play his endgame, where he can play his endgame strategy. In chess, the king becomes very active during the endgame. He's protected, yes, in the early and the mid games, but in the endgame, he's active. He's moving around the board. And he's crucial in protecting and saving his pawns. Just like our king will be coming for us in the end game. And to get back to the pawns, what are they up to in the end game? I'll mention back again that pawns only take 1 step forward. They're not allowed to step to the side. They're not allowed to step backward. The only way that a pawn can make progress is by moving forward. I want to look at Philippians 3:12. Not that I have already obtained this or am already perfect, but I press on to make it my own because Christ Jesus has made me his own. Again, it's because we are moving forward and that we are always striving for that perfection that Jesus laid out for us as a template, that we can continue to move forward. And why is that forward march so important to a pawn on that chessboard, if y'all know? Because when a pawn reaches the end of the board, when he reaches the opponent's side, when he reaches the end, when he's run his course, he's promoted. I'm hearing it now, yeah. He gets promoted. The king, for those who don't know about the chess, when a pawn reaches the other side of the board, any of the other pieces that have already been taken can be replaced onto the board for that one. King, rook, all of a sudden that one measly little piece, just like we're just a little bit better than the beasts of the earth, becomes a lot more powerful and crucial to that end game. He promotes us to be kings and priests alongside him. And even though in chess you can't promote a pawn to a king, God wrote the rule book. He can change it if he wants, right? All things are possible through him. And we get promoted to kings or bishops once we've run our course. So I just want to say that when you stop and consider the strategy that God's laid out before us in this Bible, this white and black and sometimes red book, being a pawn's a pretty good gig.